Hey everyone. Sorry about being late. I like to do things like last minute. It's a little bit more of a rush. But, I have like an exciting talk for you anyways, even though it's going to be like 5 minutes shorter than expected. I might even leave room for questions at the end, depends how it goes. So, today I'm going to talk to you guys about blockchain tech and tech law. It's like a mix tech and tech law talk. I'm going to be pretty light on tech details, but I'm going to talk about like the basic tech details and try to relate them to like tech law realities. And I'm going to be going off my slides, and I have to like refresh my slides, but like probably everything should be smooth sailing. So thank you all for coming, and here we go. So here's kind of like the outline of the talk. Basically, I'm going to do a lot of background. Most of the talk is going to be background, basic facts and circumstances that like will help you imagine, the things that I'm saying or the things that I like, I want you to take away from the talk, etc. And maybe hopefully make this stuff accessible where normally it might be like esoteric and rather inaccessible. So, the background, you can read it. I'm not going to list it out, but then I'm going to talk about like the opportunity that we have because of this and the possible futures that we can expect today, and like how we might be able to improve the situation. So what is tech, or like what do I mean when I say tech in this context? And basically there's like three things. There's technology, which is kind of like the thing we normally think of as tech, as like these tech objects, things that like persist in the world and like somehow exist out there as tech objects. Or at least as like formal specs or like documents or something, like we have a tech object written down in math or something. And we have technical information, which I also am considering to be like in the scope of tech for the purpose of this talk, and also like technique, which is like kind of, the disciplinary kind of like, like how do we use tech? Like how do you interact with it? Like it's more of like a performative relational to the objects and to the information. So in some way there's like objects, knowledge or information, like doctrine, and then like technique, which is like the practice or discipline or a performative kind of aspect to it. And so tech kind of has these like different components. And when I say tech, I'm kind of like referring to all of it. And so cyberspace is this thing that's like super relevant to this whole conversation, and like it's like in some way it's like made possible by tech stuff. Basically we have personal computers, like connections, routers, the internet, the web servers that make this crazy infrastructure where like internationally all over the world we can make this space called cyberspace, which like today is like mostly like known for like the web, where you go to like websites and like you type stuff and then like the website's content changes and like you come back and like your post is still there, and like there's like this kind of amazing space that's created on like some computer somewhere that like is connected to like your computer here somewhere, and there's like all these intermediate tech objects and tech information and techniques that are required to pull this all off. So this is like the stuff of cyberspace, the technical stuff of cyberspace on some like basic level. There's obviously like, lots of infrastructure in the web and stuff that I'm not like mentioning. I'm not trying to go super deep into cyberspace or like web tech. How about blockchain tech? So like blockchain tech has like a somewhat different kind of space to it. It uses consensus protocol technology, and like rather than having like web servers, we have like crypto economics and blockchain governance. So basically, like, there's a cryptocurrency that incentivizes people to run these nodes that form consensus, and then we like govern the software repositories, and kind of we have this consensus protocol technology that like, in particular, blockchain made scalable. That's like the core of the blockchain space, and it's really interesting because it's not like normal cyberspace. Like normal cyberspace is on a web server, like on someone's server that they own, operate, control, have legal responsibility for, etc. So, and then when you want to use this stuff, you need to have like all sorts of background information. You need to understand like asymmetric key cryptography, or like you're going to like potentially get wrecked in a rather unfortunate and costly manner. And you need to understand basically like that nodes and services don't play necessarily the role of like running the blockchain. It's not like Etherscan owns Ethereum, runs Ethereum. It's not like the node operators or the miners own Ethereum or run Ethereum. So there's like this kind of basic information about like the blockchain you need to know in order to like use it safely, because like imagine like you don't know about asymmetric key cryptography, you lose your keys, you try to call the operator, like it's been seen and done too many times, and it's like really been a lot of pain for a lot of people. And so you really need to know this background stuff in order to like use this tech. And then there's like basically the discipline associated with that to some extent. Coinship. This is an interesting word I just made up. So the idea is like, there's like all of this kind of like relationship to coins that you have to have. And like some people are hodlers. Some people think they can like time markets. Like some people are no coiners and they like it helps. And like people have different kind of coping strategies for like how to deal with the information in hand. And then there's like the actual practice of participating in governance, which is like a really, really important thing that like makes this all possible, really. And so like blockchain tech technically is actually made possible by a bunch of stuff that's like you might already feel the sort of legal implications of. So now, what about law? Like, what is law? Like, when people talk about law, it can often be very confusing because it's filled with basically like a lot of different conflicts of interest. And so people have like views of law that reflect their like position in the law and the place in law that they're in. Like some people, if you say law, it's just like a scary word. Like some people, if you say law, it's like something that's reserved for like the priest class of like lawyers to figure out. But like if you're like a lawyer, or if you're like deep inside the law communities, you have a much more diverse and nuanced and like complex picture of law. It's like depending on where you are, the law feels much different. But as like an educational tool, here's kind of like the basic, like essentialist kind of strategic definition that I like to use, or like, like maybe not definition, but like theory of law. That like law basically is some stuff that, that structures, constitutes, modifies, regulates, modulates, mediates conflict or disputes. So it's like the stuff that is dual to conflict and disputes that like helps us manage conflict in society. And so, law is always about managing conflict, preventing it, dealing with it, resolving it, etc. And then there's also, so that's like the stuff of law in some way. And then there's like legal representations and legal doctrine, which is like the stuff that we use to understand the law, and includes stuff like legal orders, legal analysis, legal advice, like, like things where people say like, oh, here's what's going on, and like, or here's how it's gonna be, or like, all these variations. There's very different legal postures that exist based on the position of like power or authority, or like, like understanding that you're speaking from. And so there's like legal representations, which are also kind of an important part of law, really. And sometimes people like only recognize like legal representations of the law as law. But there's also legal practice, discipline, and this kind of like whole broader performative order in the law. And so it's not just, and so it's people's like legal practices and people's like more legal modes of adapting to the like existence of conflict and the imminence of conflict in society, really, is also diverse and interesting, and it also kind of ends up being really important in the law. So, there's like somehow like there's like actually like in our conflict something that is like the law that's actually there. And then there's like our legal like representations, understandings, and then there's like our legal practices and disciplines, and all this stuff together somehow comes together in the law as like, like that like is this thing that is like structuring all of our conflicts, like on a day-to-day, like immediate basis, as well as like on a like long-term and all sorts of different time frames. So when I talk about law, like that's kind of like at a high level what I'm talking about. So tech law and the law. So basically like, tech law is law that governs conflict in tech. It's the law that's dual to tech conflict. But like law in general is, a big complex thing that is like shaped by all the ways that conflict can play out, and tech affects the ways that people have conflict. People have historically always used techniques, and in various senses of the word tech in conflict. And so, like the theories and practices and stuff associated with the way we have conflict over tech really can influence, the shape of the tech law battlefields. But so does actually like the design of the tech. Well, the important thing to recognize also is that like tech law doesn't exist in a vacuum. We have like the tremendous legal history that you can't like possibly understand without a historical perspective. Like law is so complex, we have so much conflict over time. It's impossible to like understand the law as it is today without like understanding like how we got here, because like it's of the level of like complexity of the thing. And so and because of like this basic harmonization that needs to happen in the law, the history of the law up to this point is going to influence how we have conflict in tech. We can't just have tech law conflict independent of like the law as it is today, because like people are, ready to bring existing legal culture. They do it even unintentionally by just being cultured in the way that they have conflict, and so they will always bring the law to where they have conflict, and people will always bring the law to them in the forms that they recognize. And so, law is like really old, really complex, and it's something that we need to understand our current disputes in terms of. And so we can't just imagine tech law as being independent of the law. So here are some like blockchain tech design realities that like end up being important, like legally speaking, to our tech law questions. Let me just drink some water real quick. Thank you. So we have this requirement for cryptocurrency for like the basic institutional design of like public blockchains. That it doesn't work without them, basically, because of the way that the fault tolerance works. We need this like cryptoeconomics and this cryptocurrency. And so the fault tolerance is like a big part of the model, because we don't, and the whole model is like we're not owned and operated by like node operators. And so like they're not like, it's not like the service provider, like the devs or whatever, there's like there's not supposed to be anyone who like runs the blockchain. And so the fault tolerance and resiliency thing, plays into like this legal question of like how do you have beefs around the blockchain, because like if you can't order the node operators or like easily anyone necessarily to change it. So there's basically like this basic, because of the distributed nature of the consensus protocol, basic level of like fault tolerance and resiliency that's required, and that poses like a legal barrier to any kind of conflict that's going to change the blockchain, because of like the force of the beef or whatever. And also we have like for technical reasons, we have like this strong requirement for trademarks and up-to-date software repositories. Because of like BitRot and the basic realities of software development, we have to like maintain up-to-date software repositories. And we have to have a trademark so that we know when we talk about it and when we like buy and sell the cryptocurrency, or that we know what we're getting into, and because we're all talking about like using the same instance of a protocol from like a particular software repo. And so like their trademark is like a necessary part of like just like the way in which we use a blockchain. Just like it's like part of the basic information of like how you use a blockchain. It's like like what is the using Bitcoin? Are you using Ethereum? Like you just like really got to know that. It's basic fact about blockchains. There's like trademarks and software repositories that are kind of like in some way places where the law maybe exerts influence, where usually it might have exerted influence on like, for example, like the node operators, which we don't really have here. So here, it's like as like more background, basically, we have existing legal realities in these spaces. Like trademark law is old, intellectual property law is, probably also old, and in our context, we have like this open source norm and regime, and so these are kind of like existing legal realities that will influence how conflict in crypto and like blockchain in particular play out, because like we can't like reinvent trademarks or trademark law or intellectual property law really exactly. We kind of like, or let me put it like this: if we try to, then we'll have like this like beef with like the fact that like the way that we're having conflict isn't in line with like the like law that's already established. And so, and then there's also like these kind of like tradition of like tech laws regulating tech as if it's a tool that people use, and they're keeping people, responsible for the way they use the tool. And so like, if you did something with malintent, if you did like damages, if you are like, criminal using these tools, like it doesn't matter what tools you're using, that's a crime. And so you can have like a regulation of tech through the use of tech as tools in like existing legal notions of like, responsibility, liability, like contract tort, criminality, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's basically just from its use, this kind of basic legal regulation of the use, because like people are engaging in it to do other things. But you know, like notably, that's not exactly a regulation of the substance of the tech. It's just like how people use it, how people interact with it. Although of course it can like have impacts. And then there's like this question of like professional liability for like architects and engineers. This is like also like a normal reality in like the law, like generally speaking, because when you're building like bridges, like super important infrastructure, and you screw up in a way that causes lots of damage, like usually like you have like some liability, and you have some way in which that's managed. You have some way in which, you know, you might have like insurance, and then as long as you're not criminal, like the insurance covers it or something. And so there's like this professional liability norm in like any kind of like high tech and like especially infrastructure kind of space. And then there's like in our space, like it's particularly relevant to talk about financial markets regulation, which has like this long and like, you know, especially more and more important over time until maybe now question mark regulation, where basically like the ways in which you can legally spend money or like lawfully spend money from like who you are, depending on what position you are in the law, like is really used by the law to like enforce this kind of order globally. And so like financial markets regulation is like a really, really like important piece of the law. And crypto in some way, like as like it's in its like tech image, doesn't really recognize that in some ways. And so there's like these are like some existing, you know, just some existing prior like legal realities that are going to be like, you know, set the stage for conflict in tech law actually, because like of the way this is all packaged and distributed as technology. And then there's like, we have this like kind of thing in the law where basically the nation states have become like, you know, or like historically have become like this kind of like ultimate source of law, where like they have like ultimate authority in this like geographic area, and you know, but like technique and tech in general isn't bound geographically, and so like the way in which we use this nation state to manage conflict, and the way in which we manage conflict in crypto, you know, maybe there's like some room for some conflict there, because the norm of like state enforced rules as like the way we do crypto law is like doesn't like really work in like this like crazy cyberspace that's like international, or if it works then yeah, it needs to be like very coordinated and kind of you know, a global enforcement regime, which is something that like legally there's a lot of resistance towards, because people want to have like basically like agency in their law. They don't want to have like global police coming down and telling them like you can't run these servers or whatever. And then basically there's this other really kind of relevant, deeply relevant reality, which is that like the way that like the economics of law works today, and like the like, you know, like in the like law of economics, like we really rely on economic growth, and like the way that like the economy and the economists and everyone understands this is like we really rely on technological progress for economic growth. And that's like a real high level strategic legal reality where like that like sets agendas for like people all over the world, and they were like willing to like back them up just to make sure that we have this like tech accelerationism that's like required for economic growth. So there's this kind of like conflicting legal like desires, right? You want to keep people accountable for their professional like failures, but you also want to encourage innovation, and so like the law is like used to juggling these kinds of conflicts of law, and I don't mean like between jurisdictions in like the private international law sense. So that's like some existing legal realities that like, you know, we experience today as being super relevant to blockchain governance and crypto law, just on like a almost day-to-day basis. So right now we have basically so this is like what I like claim is like some tech law that we already have associated with blockchain tech quite strongly. And basically like this whole like doctrine and belief and like, you know, like view of like the blockchain as immutable. Like when you learn about blockchain, you learn that it's immutable, you learn about all this minimization, trustlessness, permissionlessness stuff, which I still insist like, and I think is like reasonable to call it Szabo's law. And, you know, fight me, like let's talk about it. And, you know, and then basically, you know, there's this like real information, legal information about how we fight about crypto that says like, oh, we don't change the protocol, we don't change the blockchain, like that's not a thing that we do, and like we minimize it as much as possible. So there's like this really strong legal norm, which is associated with the technology so deeply that people will be like, if it's not immutable, it's not a blockchain, it's a database, and like all sorts of like asinine and inane stuff, like you know, I can go on, and maybe I will. I mean, I'm going to do Q&A maybe in a bit. And we also have this open source norm, which is basically like, oh, like we're like open source software. We try to be like software as speech, like, you know, like crypto is speech. Like, let's do everything open and free, and have this like, we have this like really strong open source culture in crypto, which is like a very real reality in our tech law because like of the abandonment or like the disowning of responsibility that is cultured in open source, really. And then we have like trademark protections, which is actually like a, you know, very, very like real thing in crypto where like, you know, like I'm involved in a trademark dispute and like you probably know people who are too. And it's like a really, really high stakes thing when there are trademark disputes in crypto. I mean, which Bitcoin is actually Bitcoin? Like even me saying that is like almost a crime because it might be like misleading people into buying something that's not Bitcoin as Bitcoin, you know? Like, so like, you know, like this stuff is highly contentious and like highly much like even me saying that, like I feel like the like specter of liability because of like when you suggest that there might not be only one Bitcoin, it's like a trademark issue. It's like it becomes like a fraud issue. And it's a really serious high stakes stuff that people will like go to war over in crypto all the time. And this stuff is like kind of already very associated tightly with the blockchain space, and this kind of like defines in some way our reality today. So basically what happens is like this doesn't actually like square up well with these legal realities we just talked about. And so there's gonna be conflict in tech law in particular over like this stuff. You know, the blockchain objects is accessible like basically everywhere. You know, it like facilitates crime. It like creates new schemes for evading liability. It creates risks for financial markets regulation. It has no national authority that can like say like what's up and creates like this highly politically, economically contested space. So like, you know, we set the stage. It sets the stage for really a lot of conflict in tech law in particular because it's packaged, distributed, and advertised as technology. And you know, in some way that's like very, very fair, but it's not obviously that simple. You know, we just talked about like immutability, open source, and trademark as being like kind of like you know like little tech law realities today in blockchain that people like really like are like so attached to that like it's hard to disassociate blockchain from them. And we have basically like an obligation to prevent some bad outcomes, because basically like in the context of these conflicts, there's a tremendous amount of stakes. And there's like certain things that like could happen that like will like end badly, like we can just sort of tell analytically, that I want to like caution us against. So this first one is like along the lines of immutability, like do we really want to be legalizing fully autonomous software? And legalizing in the sense of like, you know, making protected by law. Like in the way that we're doing with blockchain immutability, and like this whole like unstoppable code and minimization of governance, and like no, don't interfere with the software no matter what, because like that's like not allowed. And also like an alternative like that I think is like a very, very real risk is that like we will legitimize governance systems and say, look, we like follow the system makes the decisions, the system is responsible, it wasn't me, it was the system, you know, but like systems don't govern. Like systems don't govern. Systems are not people. Systems are not personalized. They're when you talk about systems, it is kind of dehumanizing. If there's people in those systems, you know, there's a lack of judgment in systems. Like there's no moral responsibility that a system has by itself. You know, a system's not a person. And so like to legitimize like governance systems as like a thing, as like a way we make decisions is like something that we like have a tendency towards in crypto because like we know systems, we like systems, but systems are not the kind of thing that governs anywhere really. And people like to pretend that systems govern because it limits their liability, it limits their responsibility, it limits the extent to which like they have to actually be accountable for the results of their will, really. And so there's a big conflict of interest that makes people think that like we can just have a system that governs. We don't have to govern. The system will govern. We'll delegate our responsibility to the system, basically. And there's like another similar thing, which is like, okay, well, it's not a system. Let's create a state. You know, let's have like a state, a crypto law state that will like govern for us, and then we don't need to be responsible. We can delegate it to the state, who is like going to be like essentially like us incorporated, represented by so and so according to this kind of like state like rules, which it's like it normally ends up being like this, like state system that we use as like kind of like a person to like dictate the law or like dictate how conflict will play out, and that's like super dangerous because we're talking about creating like a global state that has enforcement power everywhere. And then we have like this kind of like, just a little more generally, like rather than like a state or a system, like just general the notion of positive law, like we can somehow like figure out by agreement or by the stuff we've written down or by the stuff that we can all check how we're gonna have these conflicts. These conflicts are so deeply contentious, there's no way that we're gonna resolve them from agreeing on something. I don't care if it's principles, I don't care what it is, a constitution, like a code of conduct, it doesn't matter. Like there's no positive legal basis for managing conflicts this high stakes, this contentious, this huge, and this potentially consequential. And also, like again, that is an avenue for just making yourself not responsible for your role in conflict because, like, hey, I checked and the law said this is the outcome. Like, this is not me. This is not my will. Like, I'm not responsible for this. And but that's not like real life. Like real life is like you like want to not be responsible, but like you kind of are because like you are, if you fail to like factor your will in the projections of the future, then like you're kind of like, acting like you don't exist in the world. And really like in being this kind of like, not responsible or just claiming that you don't have power where like, but if you're in this room, like I promise you, you have power, like you are, like you have the like requisite basis for being responsible. And, you can't like say like, oh, law is this like thing that we all agreed to, or like this thing that we can like figure out in this like deterministic closed way and not be responsible for like the result and then basically say, look, my hands are tied. I can't, I'm not like, and then have everyone's hands be tied and say like, here's how the law works. So positive law has like many, many different ways of working, but it's like ultimately like all about like we can all commonly check how the law is gonna work. But that kind of makes it so that like, it erases our conflicts, it erases our possibility for conflicts because we have to like check using the same basis how we're gonna have conflicts, and it kind of like really reduces the space for us to maneuver in our disputes. And again, creates space for us to absolve ourselves of responsibility for the conflicts that we're engaging in, the conflicts that we're setting up, the conflicts that we're framing, the conflicts that we're creating and being party to, being adjacent to, being just conscious of, even if they're not like a part of our mainstream like discourse. Probably because like of the scary nature of all this stuff. I think like the big like thing I want to caution everyone for like in this space all the time is like any way to try to delegate your like moral agency and responsibility or to like deny like the reality that people like cannot delegate their agency and moral responsibility. And so, and that basically is like a basic legal like fact, in my opinion, or not even my opinion. It's just like the nature of having actions with consequences in the context of other people. It's like basic responsibility that we have, and there's lots of attempts in this space and lots of attempts in the law to try to absolve people of this agency and responsibility because it's hard to be responsible. But that's the nature of like being in like a society where you can make decisions that affect the lives of others. It's just like you have to recognize that you have agency in what happens and take responsibility for that. You can't like pretend that you didn't just choose this and then not be responsible, even though like the whole time you like made this happen by like being like, this is convenient for me and I'm not gonna do anything. For example, among like many other possible postures and ways to like disclaim and avoid being responsible and being accountable and being, like there as like a recognized agent who's choosing this or participating in this and steering it in a particular way or is like, and instead trying to like obscure and say like, oh, like it's like immutable technology, like not my fault, no one did this, like kind of stuff. So that's like a big caution. Sorry, I've spent so much time on that. I'm like obsessed, and I think it's super important. Sorry, I have like some duplicate content here. But basically, we have a tremendous opportunity to develop our legal capacity and to have conflicts in blockchain law in like a safe and responsible way that doesn't commit any of these faults of absolving people of their agency and responsibility in these conflicts. And that is like a tremendous opportunity because we have like this space to fight over where we don't have clearly established legal actors who can just dictate how it's going to be. And that is not an opportunity that comes along very often because people like their legal power, they like their legal positions, they like to solidify them, they like to conflict people out of even considering that like someone else might be, you know, have some agency in the law. So people are really, really protective about the law, and the opportunity to like have clearly an opportunity to develop how we have conflict in the law is, you know, rare and interesting and needs to be taken kind of seriously in order to take advantage of the opportunity and not end up in like a super bad outcome. So here are like, for example, bad outcomes that are like really, really like on the route today, like on like very possible today, very much stuff that we can't say that we have a reasonable strategy for avoiding. Like legalize fully autonomous software, like no matter what happens, like you don't change the code, like it doesn't matter how many people are dying, like doesn't matter, you know, what Rube Goldberg machine is like using that piece of code, like, you know, fully autonomous software, like rather than deal with conflict, like let's just make it be autonomous. Like that is a very possible future. That's like kind of our present already, so it's like a reality already in some deep way. And then we have also this like the possibility of like this fractionation and having like national or multinational blockchains because like people can't agree on like a global basis, or not people can't agree. Let me take a step back. Whoa, I shouldn't have said that. Sorry. Like, wow, that was a mistake. I didn't mean that at all. If people can't responsibly have conflict, and it's not responsible to have conflict by forcing people to agree, then we might have this kind of splitting into different national or coalition, like you know, like different groups of nations having like their blockchains that they use, and then like, you know, having this kind of like more governance that we're more kind of comfortable with applied to these institutions that are like new and kind of hard for us to imagine how we're gonna have conflict over on a global basis. Unless we're imagining that we're not going to, and we'll just let the software be autonomous, which is like kind of the default that we have today, which is deeply, deeply questionable and problematic because of its like hard line stance. So, and then there's crypto law states. Crypto law states is like a real concern. People are like, I know, we'll create a global government that will enforce the rules and say like, here's how it's gonna be. Like, let's create like something that's as powerful as a nation state, but for blockchains, and like that will like enforce these things everywhere in the world. And you know, there's a number of notable crypto projects that have this model. I'm not gonna mention them. But it's like a really, really bad thing that like no one really in their right minds could want, because like no one wants a global state that can police critical public infrastructure and like your like local hood, like, and like who knows, you know, it's like, it's kind of like this like dream for like a one world government. Like that's like what this is, and like there's people literally like trying to do this in crypto. And, you know, maybe it's not like one world because it doesn't govern everything, but it governs like, you know, infrastructure that's claiming to become critical in like public infrastructure. And like, that's like a way that you can start to extract rents and demand stuff like legally. And so like crypto law states are like one outcome that like, you know, I think is like a really possible future that we haven't protected ourselves against. And then we have like this international law for crypto idea that like, oh, like the nations of the world are going to get together and say like, oh, we need to work together. Or, oh, this is a problem, we need to like, you know, really, really work together. And that kind of, you know, reality is like already there, obviously to some level. But, you know, international law regulation for crypto would look basically like these big international governance bodies that we know today making these decisions and making these calls. And so in some way, that's like not really taking advantage of our opportunity to create like a new responsible way for us to like manage conflict, and it's just delegating it to, you know, the powers that be today on the international level, and like letting them take their sweet ass time to like figure this out, and like, you know, like, and do like a honestly like probably like a predictable job, which, you know, also I think is like a bad outcome. So like these are like basically our main outcomes today. This is like what we face. This is like our choice of options. This is our menu. And, you know, we could like break it down a little bit further. you know, like, does the crypto law state like use on-chain governance or off-chain governance, or like, you know, but like, there's like, this is basically like the options we have today, and like, that's not great. So we need to create new possible outcomes in blockchain governance and tech law. Like, we can't be going down these routes. We can't have fully autonomous software, crypto law states. We can't have, you know, the blockchain be split up or really governed by like the standard big like mainstream international legal like bodies, because basically that would be giving up this opportunity to actually like, you know, have a conflict in a new way, in a new type of space that like is, you know, although it is still tied to and related to and going to be harmonized with some aspects of the law, where we still have a tremendous amount of room to maneuver and experiment, and where we don't have to like throw away our opportunity in order to like not be responsible. And so I think we need like basic legal training for people with agency in tech law. Like, if you're making decisions that impact the way people have conflict over technology, like, you should probably have like a little bit of basic legal training, because like you should understand that like of the liability that like comes with that kind of role and posture and position. And you should understand that that's like, you know, something that like you might want to protect yourself from, but like also, which is like a normal and natural and actually very important part of law, that like people with agency over the lives of others are accountable and liable, and, you know, don't just treat them with disregard or negligence or any of the other horrible ways that people treat each other. You know, we need to recognize the basic legal and legalistic side of blockchain. Like, the blockchain has always been legalistic. It's always been about how these conflicts play out, from Bitcoin to like the Bitcoin white paper, like the Ethereum white paper, the Ethereum yellow paper. There's like all of this legal language drenched, tightly associated with it. And right now we need to like, you know, recognize that like that's like a thing we need to be responsible for. We can't just like act like, oh, it's just tech, or we're doing just tech stuff. Although, like, nonetheless, you know, we really need to like get to a position where we can have securely conflict in tech law, where we're not trying to like hide behind misrepresentations, where we're not trying to take hardline postures, where we're ready to like have conflict in a way that is like recognizing of other people's like agency, responsibility, like moral will in the space, and not trying to kind of make it something depersonalized, make it something that like you're not responsible for, and something where basically like, you know, you have a secure posture and therefore can provide security to other people, as opposed to having this posture of like, I put myself in a straitjacket, therefore you can trust me, which is like insane and not sustainable. So, you know, right now we don't manage our conflict in tech law sustainably. We have like this complicated like legalistic institution, and then we say it's like immutable and stoppable technology, and it is super insecure, just like as a matter of like interpersonal relationships over conflict. You know, like you can't like tell someone like, I made this thing, it's immutable, I'm not going to change it, and like it doesn't matter what happens to you. You know, and so like when we make it just about tech and we forget about like the context of conflict with other people, it can be really very, very dangerous. And so we need like security. We need to like have a secure approach and not be so insecure, and have like, and not try to be like, here's how we're gonna do it, here's a model, here's a system, here's like the rules, here's how we can suspend judgment and just make decisions and be happy with ourselves. We need to like, you know, recognize that in this time we don't have these things that we can rely on. We don't know, we need to be responsible, and we need to act like we're participating in these conflicts, not act like we're, you know, like nothing we could do, like Satoshi decided this, like Szabo decided this, like, and then like now like we have this fully autonomous software, oops, like let's, you know, it's something where, you know, we have to have beefs with these people. We can't let them like dictate that we're gonna have like future forever fully autonomous software, because like back in the day they had like some paranoid ideas about law, and like that was their solution. So, you know, these are my suggested interventions, really. And that's my talk, that's everything, that's all my content. So thank you so much for listening. So let's see, do we have time for Q&A? We have like maybe some time.
So there will be a course about legal education, like where can I sign up? It will be really nice.
Sorry, what was that?
I mean, about the legal education, I think it's great.
Yeah.
I myself am like working here, and I have like very little knowledge about legal, and I agree it's like really important. So
yeah, so the thing to note is like, okay, depending on like people's like place in the law. They have very different like view of what the law is. And so if you want, you could like, you know, you usually like try like a diverse, try like how to get a diverse taste, because like legal traditions all over the world are very different. And another thing to say is like, oh, like there are great in our space like organizations that do this stuff, like Koala, like Crypto Law Review, for example, and they're worth looking at, worth checking out. And basically, like, you know, but this is a space that's heating up. Everyone's going to be like super trying to like set the educational agenda, because like that's like a power move to say like, okay, like how are we all going to be educated about how we have this conflict, and like how can we get them to all like accept the system that will let like my project go through unscathed, you know? So like there's going to be all this kind of like conflict over it, and you have to realize it's like highly political, even like the idea of like legal education for people with agency in tech law, you know, because like people in tech law, people who with agency in tech are basically like used by people with like in strong legal positions in order to like do crazy shit without their really like understanding or of like what like the like law people like figured out is like the best business model for us to like just really crank it or whatever. So like tech people, like to give legal education to tech people actually like maybe changes the dynamic in a tech company, and like where tech people like aren't willing to be as exploited, you know, and that's like so it's like political. This is like a very political thing. It's gonna be like highly contentious, and you have to think, you know, like who's providing me with this information? What are their incentives? Like there's almost no way they're not going to be conflicted when they tell you this stuff, even if it's only like just to impose their own legal order that they have and that they like enjoy in their own like imagination in their like legal pretend world or whatever. So people will have like so many conflicts of interests, and so like I have a hard time like really recommending, but I would say like this, like there's great places where people share ideas and where you can hear lots of different perspectives, and that really helps, because like law really is about conflict, and so if you only hear like certain perspective, it's like really can like, you know, maybe make it harder for you to recognize like how could we responsibly manage this dispute, for example. So, you know, it's important to have like a diverse legal education. Don't like just go to like US law school, or don't just go to like law school in Paris. Like don't just do that. Like you have to have like a much more broad world, especially when it comes to crypto law specifically, right? I mean, if you want to be a lawyer in France or in the USA, I mean, yeah, those are the right choices. But like, if you're just interested in like being responsible for your agency in like tech law by virtue of working on blockchain tech, then like, you know, that's like not the place to go. Like they're not set up for that. They're not gonna like know what to do with you even.
Yeah, so thank you for this. And you know, it's interesting because it's a very challenging problem. It's not that easy, right? And we're basically following this, we need to go against the popular convention of mutable stuff that is going to change the pattern that we currently have. I made a personal mistake that I thought that in order to meet the law, we'll just build private chains. And I thought that that's going to be like the right way to go about it. And then wasted 3 years just building isolated islands that we couldn't connect to. And the question is, do you believe that we'll be able to find a way to be both working with a legal kind of posture, so not to say that we know what is the law and everything is going to be like future-proof, but that will be an incentive for other projects to actually to work in a way that is not going to create this autonomous software that we cannot stop, while still being profitable and have the incentive model to do the right thing?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think there's like so much breadth of possibility, and it's actually like much more valuable if the software isn't immutable, you know, and it's much more valuable if we can like responsibly have conflict about it than if we have to like hide in our shells and be like, can't touch this, you know, for example.
Okay, thank you.
Would you set up incentives for techie people to run for office in like nation states, or do you think that's not a good way to go about it?
No, I don't think that's great. No, I mean, it's very exceptional that that would be a good idea. You know, I think like there's already tremendous incentive if you like know to like learn about law because like of like your like reduced ability to be like exploited and taken advantage of if you know about law. But you know. I think there's also like very limited national solutions to these tech problems because like what's the nation in which Ethereum is governed? Is it France? I don't know.
Thank you for the talk. My question is, what are the lessons that we can take from Web 2 from a legal perspective and standpoint and apply to Web 3?
The threat is real. Don't become complacent ever. It's like the progression of like the powers that be into like a position of like exploiting the technology for like their like political agenda is like slow and inexorable, and like we can move fast, but like they have like another level of momentum in some way. And so like in some way, let me say like this, there was like a lot of like centralization of power and corporate capture in the web that like we still feel to this day, where like who knows how many companies like know exactly who's in this room and what like is streaming through the air right now, really. And there's so there's been like a tremendous amount of like insecurity and like deviation from like the original like spirit of the internet, to a point where we're like it's like a system of like control and not just, obviously it's complicated, but I think the main things that we can learn is like everyone from like the early web days has regrets, like they have serious regrets. And so like we don't want to be them in 30 years, like being like sorry about what we did or what we didn't do. Sorry to keep it somber, but that's the talk.
Yeah, so actually this morning I read some news about the EU passing some legislation. It's like saying that full application of the EU anti-money laundering rules to the crypto sector, and what they basically say there is like a bunch of things, but also that anonymous crypto asset wallets will be prohibited. And like, what do you think about that? Because if I like take that to the full, basically everything we're doing in Ethereum space with ZK knowledge and like all these things, like, is MetaMask going to be illegal? And like, what should be the reaction of this from like the crypto sphere as a whole? Like, what do we do about this? Like,
yeah, well, there's a lot of room for interpretation about what that means, and like to make a crypto address not anonymous is quite easy, and like it's like trivial even. And so I'm not like afraid of that language in particular, and like it's gonna take a long time for them to have language that is actually like effective. And in a way where you can't just like easily non-trivial, like trivially interpret it in a way where like you're still allowed to do what you wanted to do. And so like there's like it's gonna take a while for like the really like if that's even ever possible like to happen, because like just because you're using zero knowledge proofs doesn't mean it's anonymous, like at all. Like, and like zero knowledge proofs are proofs. Like there's so much accountability there in just like the proof system, and like the fact that that is like a proof system. It's like crazy levels of like, lack of privacy even that's like entailed in like the fact that you need to like have the hash commitments to make these proofs. Like if you wanted privacy, you would have something where like there's like no linkability, like no proofs even possible, like really ideally. So I would say like this, like there's a lot of misconceptions about like what the tech can do and like what is like the basic realities of the tech. But what there isn't a misconception about so much, and like the thing that like is more clear is like that like the kind of like political negotiation over her, like our future that like we can accept for like civilians in this case in the EU, and like whether like civilians in the EU can like use like anonymous digital currency, and like like that's like it's not going to affect like like the state. It's not going to affect like people working in like for the state in various capacities, or like maybe even like people who are regulated, like probably banks, like will probably be fine to do it. Like who knows? There's going to be all these exceptions and stuff. It's only going to be like affecting like the public and stuff. So like let me say like this. you know, there's a lot of the stuff is political like that. It's kind of more about like, you know, like what is the future that we're going to like try to live in, and like they're saying like, okay, well obviously there's like these financial market risks that crypto's not dealing with, and they're concerned about that, and I mean like that's totally legitimate concern, but like, you know, like to talk about like crypto technically is like very specific, and like for something to be anonymous is basically impossible. Like if like it's like basically impossible. Like there's not that many people on Earth. Like it's like very hard to create like anonymity in like crypto system in like the strong sense, and like even especially like in practice when people are using it. So I think also like people are inspired to like, you know, like earn their freedom through the creation of these like tools where they can not be surveilled and spend money and stuff online, which is like, and I think that there's a lot of room actually in the law for compromise on this stuff, where basically like, you know, I think the law would work fine even if people like had access to like cash online. Like I'm not like that insecure about that, although I understand like everyone wants like a easier time, you know, in the law. So like it's like a conflict, and it's like highly political. It's highly you know, determined by like, you know, the different like sides of the debate in like the policy making circles, and in like these like circles that are like, you know, like trying to push this like particular like crypto law agenda. But let me say, I don't know, I haven't looked, but also I don't really, you know, like believe in like people's ability to use the language precisely and to be responsible for how it's going to be interpreted and all this kind of stuff. And so like there's so much room still, just because of the early nature of the language, you know, that you can just structure your affairs and like carry on. But I will also say like this, like you should be mindful of like the future political like wins and stuff, and say like, okay, like if politically like we don't want to accept this like lack of privacy, like that's something we should like organize like in like and like, you know, try to put pressure on, in this case, the EU, to recognize that like this is like a right that we have, and like they don't have the authority to take it away. Like for example, who knows? You know, who knows? I mean, honestly, like I don't talk to the EU. Like I'm sure you shouldn't talk to them like that if you go talk to them. I'm just saying like this is from like the point of view of like, you know, like the like rights we have today, and like how like logistically it takes to like defend them. And so like, you know, like I question, you know, like the specifics and the way this plays out in the long run and stuff, but definitely like the politics is important, and when they're signaling something like that, it's kind of like an aggressive posture. It's like increasing the stakes, but it's also creating an opportunity for people to be like, here's my fully regulated scam coin, EU approved, EU sanctioned, like buy now, you know, like, and so there's this real responsibility that we have, that like to not let people use this to create scams, and I think that's like also something that like, you know, is like kind of inevitable given the nature of the crypto space today. Like people will like take this and be like, this is a rubber stamp, I'm verified on EU, you know, and it's like, and it's going to be a thing where like it's going to be like, you know, like a questionable political legal situation that like happens because of like the people who like take these opportunities and maybe are like, you know, in line with like the system, but like maybe aren't like, you know, like the like bread and butter of crypto, I would say.
I like what you said about not kind of fighting the systems, because there's definitely humans behind these systems. That was something I needed to hear today. Thank you. But one thing I've seen in the US is these our system of law sort of being used to take advantage of people like Britney Spears, and like these conservatorships that have people kind of trapped into these situations, and they don't understand kind of how it happened. I think it happens like to older people. Is there a risk, you think, in crypto where we need to kind of, where do you think I can like set my focus? Because I watched this whole Britney Spears thing, Free Britney, and really I'm thinking, why she just needs to be like delivered a hacker, get all of her shit into like a cold storage wallet and then like disappear, because she's like trapped there. Is there something that like, do you see any, like, is this a risk to deliver a hacker? Because and like, is she gonna be further taken advantage of?
I mean, like, okay, it's like always delicate when you're trying to like help people with their like the legal disputes, but also I would say like this, like crypto is very much, you know, like into the like escapist, like, you know, like just put it in cold storage and run away kind of like life. And so like I would say like there is like tactically like maybe a possibility for Britney to become free with crypto, but like probably not really, like because like U.S. law is like has like long tentacles, and like it's gonna be hard for her to like stay out of the U.S. And also I would say like this though, you know, there's a lot of injustice in the law, and there's every legal form is abused. And there's no way to like avoid that because of like the adversarial nature of law, and because of like people's like because of the way the law is today. Basically, it's like impossible to avoid the abuse of all these legal forms. And so like, you know, like you know, it's like definitely, you know, like horrible, but like I don't know like what the like legal remedy is, because like it might just be like, you know, like a case of abuse, and like it might not be like a change in the law that's required, but just like in this case, like for justice to be done. Although I don't know, I'm not sure of the details, but like, you know, it's obviously sensitive and complicated, or maybe sensitive just because of like the like specific case that you're talking about, and like, you know, it's an ongoing case.
Well, like the conservatorship, that's just been used and abused over and over again. I think it's a much bigger issue than just Britney. She just kind of brought it to, I think, the attention of, well, my attention.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know much about conservatorship. I wish I could like talk shit about conservatorship a lot, but I can't. I don't know. So that's all. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it, guys.